The crimson hologram flickered to life in the center of Earth's Global Defense Command, casting an eerie glow across the faces of humanity's military leaders. The alien figure that materialized was imposing, with 6 arms and scales that seemed to shift color with each movement. This was High Commander Zephyros of the Dominion, and his message was crystal clear. "Primitive humans," his voice echoed through the chamber with mechanical translation. "You have exactly 72 of your Earth hours to surrender unconditionally. Your species will serve the Zephyrian Dominion as laborers and resource gatherers. Resistance is futile. We have conquered 437 worlds. You are nothing special." Captain Marcus Kane stood at the head of the war room table, his weathered hands gripping the metal surface. At 55, he had spent 3 decades preparing for this moment, though nobody else knew it. His dark eyes reflected decades of secret planning as he studied the holographic display showing the alien fleet. 3,000 ships hung in space beyond Pluto, each one larger than Earth's biggest cities. "Sir," whispered Lieutenant Rebecca Torres, Kane's trusted communications officer, "preliminary scans show their technology is centuries ahead of anything we've made public. Their weapons could glass our planet in minutes." Kane nodded slowly, but there was something in his expression that none of the other officers could read. Around the table sat the leaders of every major nation: President James Wilson of the Americas Union, Chancellor Viktor Petrov of the Eurasian Federation, and Prime Minister Akiko Tanaka of the Pacific Alliance. They all looked to Kane, the man who had somehow convinced every world government to unite their military forces under his command 5 years ago. 72 hours, President Wilson repeated, his voice shaking. "Marcus, our entire combined fleet has maybe 50 operational warships. They're showing 3,000. The math is impossible." "The math is exactly what it appears to be," Kane replied calmly, his fingers drumming against the table in a pattern that seemed random but wasn't. Deep beneath the lunar surface, automated systems recognized the coded rhythm and began powering up systems that had been dormant for decades. "Chancellor," Petrov leaned forward, his face grave. "Captain Kane, I've supported your military unification program, but this is beyond anything we prepared for. Perhaps we should consider negotiation. Slavery might be preferable to extinction." "No." Kane's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Humanity doesn't kneel, not to anyone, not ever." Prime Minister Tanaka studied Kane carefully. "You seem remarkably calm for someone facing impossible odds. Do you know something we don't?" Kane was quiet for a long moment, then walked to the massive viewing screen that showed Earth from orbit. The planet looked peaceful, blue and green, and completely vulnerable. But Marcus Kane saw something different. He saw the culmination of a plan that began the day humans first detected alien signals 40 years ago. "I know that every species the Dominion conquered made the same mistake," Kane said finally. "They showed their full strength immediately. They fought conventionally. They revealed everything they had in desperate final battles." He turned back to face the room, and for the first time the other leaders saw something that chilled them more than the alien threat. Kane was smiling. "Humanity has never been conventional. For 40 years we've been preparing for this day, not just building weapons, but building the perfect trap. Every space program, every mining operation, every scientific advance has been part of something larger." Lieutenant Torres looked confused. "Sir, with respect, our public technology isn't advanced enough to challenge them." "Our public technology," Kane repeated, emphasizing the first word. "Rebecca, send our response to High Commander Zephyros. Tell him that humanity respectfully declines his generous offer of slavery. Tell him that if he wants Earth, he's welcome to come and take it." The room erupted in protests, but Kane raised his hand for silence. "Gentlemen, ladies, in 72 hours, the galaxy is going to learn something important about humanity. We don't just survive impossible odds, we thrive on them." Outside, invisible to all sensors, ancient lunar installations began their startup sequences. Mars shuddered slightly as massive underground facilities activated for the first time in decades. Throughout the asteroid belt, mining operations that were never really about mining began revealing their true purpose. High Commander Zephyros received humanity's response and laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Soon, he would learn that underestimating Humans was the last mistake the Zephyrian Dominion would ever make. 68 hours later, the Zephyrian Dominion fleet moved into Earth's solar system like a storm of death. High Commander Zephyros stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Worldbreaker, watching his tactical displays with satisfaction. The humans had sent no further communications, no desperate pleas for mercy. They would die with their pride intact, at least. "Target analysis complete, High Commander," reported his tactical officer, a four-armed creature from the conquered Nexari species. "Earth shows minimal orbital defenses, perhaps 20 platforms. Their moon appears to be a natural satellite with some mining operations. No significant military installations detected." Zephyros nodded approvingly. "Standard formation. We'll make this quick and clean. Begin with their military installations, then target major population centers. Leave enough survivors for the labor force." On Earth, Captain Marcus Kane stood in what appeared to be humanity's primary command bunker, buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. The facility hummed with activity as officers coordinated humanity's supposedly desperate defense. But Kane wasn't watching the main displays showing the approaching alien fleet. Instead, he stared at a smaller screen that showed readings from across the solar system. "Luna Base reports all systems green," Lieutenant Torres announced from her station. "Mars installation confirms ready status. Asteroid grid is fully operational." Kane pressed a communication device that connected him to every major world leader simultaneously. "This is Kane. Operation Prometheus is now active. All civilian populations are secured in deep shelters. Military personnel, remember your training. What happens in the next few hours will echo through galactic history." President Wilson's voice crackled through the comm. "Marcus, our boys are scared. They're seeing 3,000 enemy ships on their screens." "Good," Kane replied. "Fear keeps you sharp, but remind them what we learned from intercepted Dominion communications. They've conquered 400 worlds by always fighting the same kind of war. Today they learn how humans fight." The Zephyrian fleet split into attack formations, surrounding Earth like a closing fist. Zephyros allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Another primitive world about to join the Dominion's empire. He had personally overseen 43 planetary conquests, and they all followed the same pattern. Initial resistance, desperate final stands, then submission. "Commence attack," he ordered. The first wave of energy beams lanced toward Earth's orbital platforms. Brilliant explosions lit up space as humanity's visible defenses were systematically destroyed. To the alien fleet, it looked like the opening minutes of every conquest they had ever conducted. But Captain Kane was counting down under his breath. 3, 2, 1. "Luna, you are cleared to drop the mask." On the bridge of the Worldbreaker, alarms suddenly began shrieking. The tactical officer's face went pale as his displays lit up with new contacts. "High Commander, massive energy signatures from the human moon. I'm reading. This can't be right. Thousands of weapon platforms coming online." The lunar surface split open like a flower blooming in fast motion. What humanity had called mining operations for decades revealed themselves as the largest military installation ever constructed. The moon wasn't just Earth's satellite. It was humanity's first line of defense, honeycombed with weapons that made Dominion technology look primitive. "Impossible," Zephyros roared. "Our intelligence showed primitive mining." "Sir," his communications officer stammered, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth." Kane's face appeared on the main screen, and he was no longer the desperate defender Zephyros expected to see. The human was smiling with absolute confidence. "High Commander Zephyros, this is Captain Marcus Kane of the Terran Defense Force. You made two critical errors. First, you assumed we were primitive. Second, you assumed we were unprepared." The lunar weapons opened fire, and space lit up with energy beams that tore through Dominion shields like paper. But this was only the beginning. "Mars Station, you are cleared for reveal," Kane continued, his voice now broadcasting across all Dominion frequencies. The red planet's surface cracked, along hidden seams exposing massive railgun emplacements that had been disguised as geological formations. What the aliens had dismissed as planetary science became humanity's second surprise. "Asteroid grid, Initiate combat protocols. Throughout the asteroid belt, thousands of objects that registered as simple space rocks suddenly came alive with engine flares and weapon signatures. Humanity hadn't been mining asteroids for resources. They had been converting them into automated defense drones, each one carrying enough firepower to level a city. Zephyros watched in horror as his tactical display transformed from a simple conquest into a nightmare scenario. The primitive humans had turned their entire solar system into a trap, and his fleet was caught in the center of it. All ships, evasive maneuvers, he screamed, but it was too late. Humanity's hidden weapons fired in perfect coordination, controlled by artificial intelligences that had been analyzing Dominion tactics for 4 decades. Ships that had conquered hundreds of worlds began exploding in brilliant flashes as human technology, refined in secret and built for this exact moment, proved superior to anything the galaxy had seen before. Kane's voice echoed across the chaos. "Welcome to Earth, High Commander. We've been waiting for you." Admiral Vorthak commanded the Dominion's 2nd Battle Group, positioned behind Jupiter to cut off any human escape routes. He watched his tactical display with growing disbelief as the forward fleet's signals began disappearing one by one. These weren't battle casualties. These were total annihilations. "What in the void is happening out there?" he demanded, his serpentine body coiling around his command chair. His species, the Korthani, had served the Dominion for 8 centuries, and he had never seen anything like this. His sensor officer, a trembling Nexari, looked up from her console. "Admiral, I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. The humans, they've weaponized everything. Even their gas giants are showing artificial structures." Vorthak's blood ran cold. "Show me Jupiter." The main screen shifted to display the massive planet, and what they saw defied everything they knew about stellar engineering. Jupiter's great red spot was pulsing with unnatural light, growing brighter with each passing second. On Earth, Captain Kane stood before a holographic display showing the entire solar system. Red dots represented Dominion ships, and they were disappearing rapidly as humanity's hidden defenses came online. But Kane's attention was focused on the 2nd Battle Group near Jupiter. "Dr. Patricia Reeves," he called to the elderly scientist at a nearby console. "How long until the Jupiter array reaches full power?" Dr. Reeves, humanity's leading expert in stellar engineering, smiled grimly. 30 seconds, Captain. 40 years of research is about to pay off." Lieutenant Torres looked confused. "Sir, what exactly is the Jupiter array?" Kane turned to address the entire command center. "For decades, we've been told that Jupiter is a failed star, not quite massive enough to ignite fusion. Dr. Reeves and her team found a way to encourage it." Dr. Reeves took over the explanation. "We didn't just hide weapons in our solar system. We turned Jupiter into the galaxy's largest directed energy weapon. The Great Red Spot isn't a storm anymore. It's the focusing array for a star-killer beam." Admiral Vorthak received this information too late. His communications officer was screaming warnings, but the words made no sense. "Sir, Jupiter is firing at us." A beam of pure stellar energy erupted from the gas giant, wider than most planets and hotter than the core of a sun. It swept across space like the finger of an angry god, and every Dominion ship it touched simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, not damaged, erased. Vorthak had one moment to understand that humanity had somehow turned a planet into a weapon before his flagship joined the expanding cloud of plasma that had once been the 2nd Battle Group. Back on the Worldbreaker, High Commander Zephyros watched in absolute terror as his invasion force was systematically eliminated by weapons that shouldn't exist. Half his fleet was gone, destroyed by technology that made Dominion science look like cave paintings. "Sir," his tactical officer whispered, "I'm reading new contacts, human ships decloaking throughout the system." Zephyros turned to see vessels emerging from what had appeared to be empty space. These weren't the crude metal boxes that most species used for space travel. These ships moved like living things, their hulls seeming to flow and adapt as they maneuvered. They were beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. How many? Zephyros asked, though he dreaded the answer. 2,000 confirmed contacts, sir. Possibly more still cloaked. The human fleet had been hiding in plain sight, their stealth technology so advanced that the Dominion's best sensors couldn't detect them even at close range. And now they moved with perfect coordination, surrounding the remaining alien ships, like wolves circling their prey. Captain Kane's voice filled the communication channels once again. Hi, Commander. I believe you wanted to make this quick and clean. Allow me to show you how it's done. The human ships opened fire with weapons that defied physics as the Dominion understood it. Energy beams that curved around obstacles to strike their targets. Missiles that phased through shields as if they weren't there. Projectiles that somehow struck multiple targets simultaneously. Commander Thex of the Vanguard cruiser Death's Edge sent a desperate message to his flagship. Hi, Commander. Their weapons are ignoring our defenses completely. Our shields might as well be decorations. How is this possible? Zephyros demanded of his science officer. The alien scientist's answer was barely audible over the chaos of dying ships. Sir, I believe they've been studying our technology for decades. Every trade agreement, every diplomatic contact, every captured piece of our equipment. They know our systems better than we do. They've built counters for everything. On Luna Base, Kane watched the battle with satisfaction but no joy. This wasn't a victory to celebrate. This was a lesson that needed to be taught. Open a channel to all surviving Dominion vessels, he ordered. His image appeared on every remaining alien ship. Behind him, the command center showed the systematic destruction of what had been the galaxy's most feared military force. This is your final warning, Kane said simply. Withdraw from this system immediately. Tell your leaders what happened here. Tell them that humanity is no longer hiding. Tell them that we remember every world you've conquered, every species you've enslaved. Zephyros found his voice, though it shook with rage and fear. You cannot defeat the entire Dominion. We have millions of ships across 1,000 worlds. Kane's expression didn't change. Hi, Commander. You brought 3,000 ships to conquer one world. In the past hour, you've lost over 2,000 of them. Do the math. The surviving alien ships began retreating, their engines straining to escape the nightmare that Earth's solar system had become. As they fled, Kane turned to Lieutenant Torres. Send a message to every inhabited world in the galaxy. It's time for humanity to introduce itself properly. 6 hours after the battle began, space around Earth fell silent, except for the occasional flash of debris burning up in the atmosphere. Of the 3,000 Dominion ships that had come to conquer humanity, fewer than 200 limped away into hyperspace. The rest had been reduced to glowing particles scattered across the solar system. High Commander Zephyros sat alone on the emergency bridge of his badly damaged flagship, staring at casualty reports that read like the end of civilization. The Worldbreaker had lost half its crew and most of its weapons. Around him, the few surviving officers moved like ghosts, still unable to process what had happened. Sir, whispered Communications Officer Vex, one of the few crew members still at his post, were receiving surrender terms from the humans. Zephyros laughed bitterly. Surrender terms? We're the ones retreating with our tails between our legs. The main screen flickered to life, showing Captain Kane once again. But this time, the human wasn't speaking from a command bunker. He stood on the bridge of a human vessel, and through the viewports behind him, Zephyros could see the wreckage of his mighty fleet. Hi, Commander, Kane began, his voice calm and professional. I want to be very clear about what happens next. Your surviving ships are being allowed to leave as messengers. You will return to Dominion space and deliver this message to your High Council. Kane stepped closer to the camera, and his expression hardened. The age of Dominion conquest is over. Any further aggression against Earth or her allies will result in humanity bringing this war to your doorstep. We know the location of every Dominion world, every military installation, every slave camp you've built across 4 centuries. Zephyros found his voice. You're threatening the entire Dominion? You're one species against an empire of hundreds. An empire built on fear and oppression, Kane replied. Built by convincing other species they had no choice but to submit. Today, we gave the galaxy a choice. On Earth, President Wilson stood beside Kane in the human ship's war room, watching long-range sensors track the fleeing Dominion survivors. Marcus, they're right about one thing. The Dominion has hundreds of member species and millions of ships. What we did today was impressive, but can we really take on an entire galactic empire? Kane turned to address the assembled world leaders, all of whom had been transported to witness humanity's first victory as a spacefaring military power. James, that's exactly the wrong question. We're not trying to conquer the Dominion. We're trying to free it. Dr. Reeves brought up a holographic display showing the galactic map. Hundreds of worlds were marked in red, indicating Dominion control. Our intelligence networks have been active for 40 years. We know which worlds joined willingly and which were conquered. Most of the Dominion's territory consists of enslaved populations who would rebel if they thought they had a chance. Chancellor Petrov studied the display with interest. You're suggesting we become liberators rather than conquerors? I'm suggesting we become what humanity has always been at its best, Kane replied. We protect those who can't protect themselves. We stand up to bullies. We prove that freedom is stronger than tyranny. Lieutenant Torres approached with an urgent report. Sir, we're receiving communications from across the galaxy. News of the battle is spreading faster than the surviving Dominion ships can travel. Kane nodded. What kind of communications? Requests for alliance, sir. 17 different species have contacted us in the past 2 hours. They're asking if we meant what we said about protecting smaller worlds. Prime Minister Tanaka looked amazed. 17 species in 2 hours? Word travels fast in space. Fear travels faster, Kane corrected. The Dominion ruled through intimidation. By defeating their fleet so completely, we've shown the galaxy that they're not invincible. Every oppressed world is suddenly wondering if freedom might be possible. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, the surviving Dominion ships continued their long journey home. But they weren't alone. Human vessels shadowed them at extreme range, invisible to sensors but making their presence known through subtle course corrections and the occasional communication burst. Commander Thex, now the senior surviving officer of his battle group, received one such message on his personal communicator. The human voice was female, calm, and terrifyingly friendly. Commander Thex, this is Captain Diana Foster of the Terran Navy. We know you're carrying wounded. Our medical ships are standing by to assist if you require aid. Thex stared at the communicator in disbelief. The humans were offering medical aid to the enemy who had come to enslave them. Why? He transmitted back. Because that's what decent people do, came the reply. Your wounded didn't choose this war. Neither did most of your crew. We don't punish people for following orders when they had no choice. For the first time in his military career, Thex began to understand why his species had lost this battle. They had been fighting soldiers who still remembered how to be human. Back on Earth, Kane stood at the observation deck of Luna Base, looking out at the debris field that had once been the galaxy's most feared invasion force. Lieutenant Torres joined him, carrying a data pad with preliminary reports. Sir, final casualty count. We lost 12 orbital platforms and 36 personnel. The Dominion lost over 200,000 troops and officers. Kane was quiet for a long moment. Rebecca, make sure those 36 names are remembered. They died protecting not just Earth, but the idea that freedom is worth fighting for. Yes, sir. There's something else. We're receiving a priority transmission from the Proxima Centauri colonies. They want to formally request membership in whatever government we're planning. Kane smiled for the first time since the battle ended. Whatever government we're planning? I suppose we should figure that out, shouldn't we? The victory was complete, but Kane knew this was only the beginning. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. Now they had to decide what kind of galactic neighbors they wanted to be. 3 months after the Battle of Earth, Captain Marcus Kane stood before the largest diplomatic gathering in galactic history. Representatives from over 300 worlds filled the massive assembly hall that humanity had constructed in orbit around Earth. The station, called Haven, was humanity's gift to the galaxy. neutral ground where all species could meet as equals. The Terran Federation had been born not from conquest but from invitation. 47 species had formally requested membership, while hundreds more had signed mutual defense treaties. The galaxy was reshaping itself around a simple principle that humanity had introduced. Freedom was not something to be granted by the powerful, but something that belonged to every thinking being. Fellow beings, Kane began, his words translated into over 200 languages simultaneously. 6 months ago, most of you lived under the shadow of the Dominion. Today we gather to build something better, not an empire based on fear, but a federation based on choice. In the audience, Ambassador Kelleth of the Andorian Republic listened with amazement. Her species had been enslaved by the Dominion for 2 centuries, forced to mine toxic crystals on airless moons. When human liberation fleets had arrived at Andor Prime, they hadn't come as conquerors demanding tribute. They had come as liberators, asking one simple question: what do you need to be free? The Terran Federation operates on 3 principles, Kane continued. First, every species has the right to govern itself. We will never impose human law on non-human worlds. Second, every being has the right to protection from aggression. Attack one Federation member and you attack us all. Third, every world has the right to leave the Federation at any time, no questions asked. Commander Felix Rodriguez, Kane's new deputy, watched from the side of the stage as delegations murmured among themselves. Some species were still suspicious, having lived under Dominion rule for so long that the concept of voluntary alliance seemed impossible. Others were enthusiastic, seeing humanity's victory as their first real chance for freedom in generations. The most interesting reaction came from the Dominion's own delegation. High Commander Zephyros sat with the representatives of 12 former Dominion worlds that had chosen to break away and seek Federation membership. His empire was crumbling, not from military defeat, but from the simple realization that there was an alternative. High Commander, Kane addressed him directly, the Federation extends the same offer to all former Dominion worlds, including your core territories. We have no interest in conquest or revenge, only in ensuring that every species has the choice to determine its own future. Zephyros stood slowly, his scaled form towering over the human delegates. When he spoke, his voice carried centuries of bitterness and, for the first time, a note of hope. Captain Kane, my species has ruled through strength for 1,000 years. We believed that order could only come through dominance. You have shown us a different path. He paused, looking around the assembly hall at species that had once cowered before Dominion might. The Zephyrian hegemony formally requests negotiations for potential Federation membership. We wish to learn this human concept of voluntary cooperation. The hall erupted in surprised murmurs. Even Kane looked shocked. The idea that their former enemies might join the Federation had been discussed, but no one expected it to happen so quickly. Dr. Patricia Reeves, now serving as the Federation's science director, approached the podium with a data pad. Captain, if I may address the assembly? Kane nodded, stepping aside for the elderly scientist who had helped turn Jupiter into a weapon. Fellow beings, Dr. Reeves began, humanity spent 40 years preparing for war. Now we want to spend the next 40 years preparing for peace. We propose the Galactic Research Initiative, shared scientific advancement, joint exploration missions, and collaborative projects that benefit all member species. She activated a holographic display showing star charts marked with unexplored regions. The galaxy is vast, and we've barely scratched the surface of what's possible. Instead of fighting over existing resources, why don't we work together to find new ones? Instead of competing for territory, why don't we explore new frontiers together? Ambassador Thurix of the Crystal Confederacy, a species known for their mathematical genius, stood to speak. Dr. Reeves, the Confederacy would be honored to share our computational technologies with human engineering capabilities. Together, we might achieve things neither species could accomplish alone. Captain Kane watched as delegation after delegation stood to pledge cooperation, knowledge sharing, and mutual support. This was what he had envisioned during those long years of secret preparation. Not humanity ruling the galaxy, but humanity leading by example. Lieutenant Torres, now promoted to Communications Director for the Federation, approached with an urgent message. Sir, we're receiving long-range signals from beyond the galactic rim. There are other galaxies out there, and some of them are showing signs of aggressive expansion toward our region. Kane nodded thoughtfully. Then it's a good thing we won't be facing them alone. He turned back to the assembly, where hundreds of species were already forming working groups to discuss scientific collaboration, trade agreements, and joint defense strategies. Fellow beings, Kane announced, the Terran Federation is officially established, not as humanity's empire, but as our shared commitment to freedom, cooperation, and mutual respect. Whatever challenges come next, we'll face them together.